to this people group, that they would learn the language, the culture, and that they would go to plant churches just like Kingdom Life, Lord, that seek to live life God's way, in a way that starts, begins, continues, and is completed in faith. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
All right, so we're going to get started. I am going to go ahead and apologize. My mic might die part of the way through, okay? So there is a great chance of that happening. If it does, I'll just talk really loud, okay? So we've been going through this series, and by going through, I mean for 1 week now, and this will be week 2. We've been going through this series that we're calling Unheard Of, and it's about the Bible stories that people never really talk about, okay? And when I say that, like, we may have some people in here who know these stories, but we probably don't have more than 3 people in here who know them well. Because honestly, I didn't know most of these stories well. You know, I knew the general gist, and this is one of those stories. I found 2 verses in this story that I absolutely loved. So, before we hop into that, you'll notice there are 2 chairs on stage that are not normally on stage. Well, the reason is I'm going to kind of use them in our lesson tonight, but first I need somebody to volunteer to come up and help me out up on stage, okay? All right. Come on up. Okay, sweet. All right, Mason, here's what I want you to do, okay? We got these 2 chairs. I need you to spend about 20 seconds, inspect both chairs, all right? And I want you to tell me which one is the superior chair. Which one is the better chair? Just objectively, okay? Check them out. You can look at them, turn them over, smell them, sit on them, whatever you need to do. Do what it takes. Figure out which chair is better. You've got 20 seconds to do so. Everybody else, I want you to turn to your table and talk about, just based off the looks, while he's doing this, just based off the looks, which one do you think is going to be better? Chair number 1 or chair number 2? Ready? Talk to your tables. Go. Chair number 1, chair number 2. Chair number 1, chair number 2. Hey, Shauna, could you throw me one random piece of candy? Why are you looking to intercept this, bro? That's probably smarter. Especially John immediately turned around and he's ready to jump. All right, so that's like 20 seconds roundabout. All right. Okay. So we've got this table. They're voting for chair number 1 is better than chair number 2. All right. Oh, chair number 2. Did I say that wrong? I thought it was 1 and 2. 1, 2. Okay. So y'all are voting chair number 2 is better. Okay. Just based off looks. Just based off looks, they think chair number 2 is better. What did y'all say? Chair 1 or chair 2? 1? Okay. Chair 1 looks better. Okay. 1 was better. 2? 2? Okay. Chair 2 looked better according to them. We're tied. What'd y'all say? Half and half. Okay. We're tied. Chair number 2. Chair number 2. He said chair number 2 as well. All right. So, I have both these chairs. Mason, as the resident expert, you've checked out both these chairs. You felt them out. Which one is more comfortable? This one's more comfortable? That one's more comfortable. Okay. Which one is overall, though? If you were like, hey, which chair is worth more? Which one is the better chair? Which one would you say? Chair 1 or chair 2? Because it what? Oh, it spins. You're saying it spins and it has armrests. I thought you said it has stains and it has armrests. All right? Okay, I want you to do something for us, okay? Come sit in chair number 1 one more time. Everybody watch him sit down in chair number 1, okay? All right. Do you feel like you're going to, you feel like you're safe? Feel like you're going to fall out? Anything? Okay, go ahead and sit in chair number 2. Everybody look at him. Can you kind of tell, like, you can probably feel where somebody else was sitting, right? All right. So here's the thing. if I were trying to sell chair number 1 and chair number 2, which do you think would sell for higher? Chair this one or this one? Chair number 1, right? That's probably going to sell for higher, right? It's actually a good chair, okay? It's actually a good chair. This chair is not. All right, Mason, what I need you to do is just chill out over there, and while you do, you can have that. You're not allergic to nuts, are you? Okay, that'd be a terrible day. All right, so I already handed it to him, so it would have been over. All right, so just chill right there for just a second. Actually, you can jump in your chair. It's right there. Okay, but I am going to call you back up. All right, so objectively, this chair, like despite my personal feelings, your personal feelings, this chair is worth more than the other one, right? But a lot of y'all said that chair 2 was the better chair. Why? It spins, all right? So it spins. What else? Has armrests. What'd you say? Oh, sorry. I thought you said something too. Oh, okay. Anything else? Spins, has armrests? You could, yeah, you can. I can say that. TJ? It does have a uniform color scheme. Is that like really important to you in your chairs? That's fair. Yeah, this one's probably harder to match with a house. Well, I don't know. I'm not an interior designer, but I get what you're saying. I'm tracking. All right. Anything else? I'd say this. I will say this one, the only reason I might say it is better is because this one's definitely broke in, ain't it? You can tell from sitting right there it's broke in, but I can tell you when I sit on this thing, I can feel like the indention of the butt cheeks, like sitting in this corner, all right? Like, you know who sat here and when they did and how long they did. Like, okay? And here's the deal. Here's why, all right? I hope that didn't offend anybody. Yeah, I don't know if that did. This chair is from my house. This chair is from Kingdom Life Church, all right? I stole it out of our offices. And so just go ahead and preface that. This is a high-quality chair. This is a nice chair. I was actually, it didn't look all that comfortable, but when I sat in it, I kind of like sunk down, right? And like, it was the right amount. I don't feel like I'm going to fall out. I feel safe. I feel secure. And when I sit in it, I know it's the better chair. So based on just pure logic, I would probably choose this chair. If I was to say, hey, you can have one of these chairs to go and resell, go and make some money. You can have one of these chairs. I'd probably choose this chair. It just makes sense. But then I started thinking, this is my chair from my house. Yo, this chair is old. This is from back before I was a kid. But I used to sit in this every day after school. It's my indention there in the corner that's on that side. I'm the reason it leans this way, all right? And it's straight up. If you look up under it, I was kind of wondering if Mason was going to do it. If you look up under it, it's like broken up under here. Like it is straight up broken. Like the wood is snapped, all right? Because I've sat in it so much. I've used it. I've had it for the longest time, and it is broken. So I would need to choose this chair, but then on some level, I'm kind of like, well, I can't get rid of that chair. My parents actually tried to. They tried to get rid of it when I was in high school, and I was like, no, you can't get rid of that. It's my chair. They're like, Jacob, it's broken. Like, we can't even give this to a thrift store. This is terrible. I was like, no, we're not getting rid of it. So I put it upstairs, and it's been sitting upstairs in my parents' house ever since, all right? So I find myself doing this. Mason, come back up here, all right? So you tested both chairs. Which one, you said that one was more comfortable, right? Okay, so that one was more comfortable, but you said this one is definitely the higher quality chair, right? Definitely higher quality. So we know this is the right choice, but for some reason we still kind of want that chair. It doesn't make sense. It's broken, it's dingy, it's stained, and it's worthless, yet we still want it. But we know that this is the right choice. So sometimes we sit in this chair. We sit in this chair. Now, you're going to have to bear with me here for a second, okay? You with me? You bought in? All right. So sometimes we sit in this chair, but then we're kind of like, you know what? I can't get rid of that chair. I want to sit in that one too. But I also know that this is the better chair, and I should be sitting in this chair, but that's my chair that I've had for the longest time. I just can't lose that chair. But I know everybody would tell me to sit in this chair, but that's my chair. But this is the better chair. And we get stuck in the middle, right? And sometimes we end up doing this sort of thing. Step back for a second. Sometimes we end up pulling one of these. Mason, I want you to kind of sit on both chairs, all right? You need to give both equal attention. Go ahead and try and sit on both. Yeah. All right, now, we're talking leisurely Sunday afternoon nap. You've got that chair, and then the current arrangement that you're doing right now, and you're going to rank them, okay? Originally, you said that's the most comfortable, you said this is the best chair. That's below this chair. Where does this rank? How comfortable is this in comparison? It's like 0 out of 10, right? It's the bottom of the 3. It's the worst conglomeration because we're trying to do both, but y'all, it just doesn't work that way. You got to pick a chair, right? You've got to pick one. You can't do it halfway like this, okay? Mason, thank you so much. Everybody give him a round of applause for what he just did. Pick something out of there. All right. And we start doing this halfway thing with these chairs, right? And obviously, that's absurd. None of us would actually try and do that. But here's the idea. Sometimes in life, we know that we have a choice between God and this other thing, right? Maybe it's just straight up in my heart what's most important. Sometimes it's, hey, I've got an hour. I could spend it on God or I could spend it on this. And we start weighing the two out and we're like, hey, I know this option better. I know it's better to spend my time on God. But this is the thing I've always done. This is special to me. I've always had, sure, it's broken. It's worthless. It's pointless. Right? It's stained, but it's mine. Right? We get so attached to certain things. And it can be something as simple as video games. Man, maybe you're a video game guy or girl. That's your thing, right? And hey, I've got an hour of my day. I hadn't talked to God at all today. You're kind of back and forth, I kind of want to talk to God, but I know that that's better. But I've always played video. I love video games. I think I'm going to play video games. I know it's not as good as God, but I still want to. And then we kind of do this halfway thing where God's not the most important thing to me, but then I say he is sometimes because I know that's better. But really, if you look at how I spend my time, I'm sitting in this chair all the time. Sure, it's broken. Sure, it's worthless. There's no point, but I still spend all my time there. But guys, here's the problem with that. If you remember when Mason was kind of going back and forth, and dude, I kind of had him going back and forth so much that at one point he's just kind of limping, he was kind of didn't know which way to go, right? In that moment, Mason had both chairs, but was he really enjoying either of them? No. He didn't enjoy either of them or use either of them as intended. He didn't get to really experience either of the chairs. So the story that we're going to look at tonight, I want you to look, and we didn't put our Bibles out. Sorry about that, interns. I meant to remind us of that. We didn't put our Bibles out. Luckily, I'm going to have it on the screen. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to pay attention to the screen. This is the story we're looking at today. It's the battle with Baal's prophets. All right, everybody say Baal. Baal. Yeah, it's like you start to say a word and then you quit halfway through, all right? Baal, all right? A lot of people will call it Baal, all right? That's the American way to say it. It's Baal. But the way they would say it is probably Baal, all right? So the battle with Baal's prophets is the story we're looking at today. It's in the book of Kings. Now, I want to catch you up on what's happening in the Bible at this point. At this point in the Bible, you can go ahead and throw up the next slide, sorry. At this point in the Bible, here's what's happened. If you remember the story of Moses, right? And they were all in Egypt. They were trapped there. But then God set them free, and they got out of Egypt. They got free. They went out into the wilderness, okay? That happened way back when. And then while they were in the wilderness, they were trying to travel to this land that God promised to them. There's this land that God promised to give them. So they're moving to that promised land, and eventually they get there. Our story last week, or the week before last when it wasn't, snowing, was in here. It was while they were still going through the wilderness, almost to the promised land, right? But then that king kind of got nervous and was trying to pronounce curses on him with this voodoo guy. It was crazy, right? It's kind of the name of the series. But they finally get to the promised land. And then when they get to the promised land, they set up kings, and they have this kingdom, all right? And that's what we're going to be reading about today. After our story happens today, eventually these kings are so bad that they will end up in exile. They will end up in exile. And then, after they're in exile for a long time, eventually they'll go back to the promised land. But then Jesus is going to come. So what I want you to understand, this is kind of after the whole Moses stuff that a lot of us know about, but it's before Jesus. We're not to Jesus yet. Okay, we're in between those two in the time where Israel has these kings set up. So our story today is going to be about these kings. So on your sheet, I didn't really make a big deal about this, so I do want to offer this up to you. The name of today's lesson is the battle with Baal's prophets. If you remember that, the battle with Baal's prophets. There's a blank up at the top, and it says like today's story or something like that. And that's the battle with Baal's prophets, okay? Some of y'all already wrote it down. I watched you do it. Y'all were like locked in. It was great. All right? So, that's where we are. Israel set up kings, all right? Israel has their kings set up. And we're going to look at a couple of them. So let me set the stage for you, okay, as to what's going on during this time. First of all, we're in Israel, but Israel is split. They had this civil war where Israel fought Israel, and they split. You have Judah in the south and Israel in the north. This story that we're going to read takes place in the north. Okay? Here's why that's important. All right? Some of y'all are like, okay, I really don't care. I'm not like big into history, right? That's fine. But here's what you got to know. Judah in the south, they weren't great. They had about 20 kings before they went into exile. They had about 20 kings. And they had only 8 of those kings that were actually good. 12 of them were terrible. They were the worst. All right? But Israel in the north, they were even worse than Judah in the south. They also had about 20 kings. Does anybody want to take a guess by raise of hand? If you get it right, I'll give you a piece of candy. How many good kings did Israel have? Let's go. What do you think? Okay, we got 2. What do you think? 0. What do you think? 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 17 was a bold guess. I almost want to give you something just for that. The answer was 0. They had absolutely no good kings. Not a single one was truly a good king, which is absolutely insane to think about. But the king we're looking at today was especially bad. The bad guys in the story, there's a new king that's taking the throne, and his name is Ahab. Everybody say Ahab. Ahab. You'll notice the bold letters match up pretty well on your note sheet. But Ahab, and then he has a wife named Jezebel. Raise your hand if you've ever heard the name Jezebel. Is it a good name to have? No, it's not. It's not. I'm sorry if you have a friend named Jezebel. Like, that's tough. Like, parents should have done some research. There's some bad stuff associated with the name Jezebel because Ahab and Jezebel are so evil. And they set up Baal as Israel's god. That's the god they set up. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Baal. I had you say his name earlier. We'll say it again. I say Baal. Baal, right? Super weird name. This is what Baal looks like. Baal was this god who kind of also, ancient drawings for some reason are kind of like AI-generated images. Like, he's got like a random arm just coming out of his hip. It's kind of weird. But have y'all messed around with AI-generated images? They don't work. Anyway, I guess they will eventually. But Baal was this god, and he kind of looked like a bull, okay? And I've got a spot. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, you can jot down notes if you want, but you don't have to, right? Baal, he looked kind of like a bull, and he and this other guy, Moloch, were kind of similar in that. They looked like a bull. And he was a storm god. He was a god of the storm. He was god of fertility. So like people actually having kids and the culture continuing. That was his deal, right? He was associated with lightning and thunder and fire, okay? So like that's kind of this guy. Doesn't sound all that good. It gets worse. Most of his followers at some point while they were following him and worshiping him, they started to worship him in a pretty unsavory way through child sacrifice. Literally, this God, as people were worshiping him, we know that a lot of them ended up saying, hey, he's the God of fire and the God of fertility. Makes sense. Let's sacrifice children to him, which is so terrible, but that's what they did. And now, you know about this terrible God. Now let this sink in. Israel is God's people. They're now worshiping that God. What do you think was the kind of stuff they were doing? They fell away pretty hard, right? They're like mixed up in some like child sacrifice stuff, and not to mention just plain old idolatry, which means to worship something other than God. Give our time, give our attention to something other than God. Remember, I was kind of hinting at that earlier with the chairs, how we know God is better, but then I've got these other things that I kind of still want. And then lastly, I want to introduce you to our good guys. Our good guys is Yahweh and Elijah. So the only prophet of Yahweh, and Yahweh is God's personal name, like the God that we worship here at Kingdom Life, like the God of all gods, the one true God. We call him Yahweh in the Bible. And we may not pronounce that right. We actually don't know how to pronounce it. Fun fact. It's really cool, actually. If you have questions about that, ask me later, because I'm a nerd for that. The only prophet of Yahweh left, though, is a guy named Elijah. All right? It's a guy named Elijah. He's the only prophet left, and those are our only two good guys in the story. Meanwhile, Ahab, Jezebel, and Baal, and the rest of Israel are the bad guys in the story. It's not looking good. Let's read our two verses that we're going to look at tonight. This is in 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 20 through 21, okay? I'm going to read it to you. It says this. So Ahab sent, the king, right? So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. Now listen to this. This is what Elijah says to them. And this is absolutely savage. This is crazy. He tears them up. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? If Yahweh is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him. It says, if Baal, then follow him. All right? So sometimes it's lost because we're reading. And raise your hand if you're like a big reader, like you just love reading books. Yeah, I didn't think so. I didn't think I'd get good interaction. That's great. I am too now, but I used to hate reading. I would never read a book. Spark Notes was my best friend, right? Y'all all know. Raise your hand if you use Spark Notes. Be so for real. Y'all are liars. I know y'all are lying. If you don't know Spark Notes, I did not introduce you to that. I'm sorry. I just realized I may have caused a problem. But anyway, Spark Notes gives you summaries of books. Okay, oh yeah, AI is now way better than Spark Notes. That's very true. All right, but anyway, whenever we're reading, we kind of get lost. We don't necessarily hear the tone. Imagine a guy standing in front of all of you. You've been going about your daily lives, and he's like, hey, how long are you going to halfway worship God? Dude, you'd be like, hold up. Like, that's a little strong, right? Like, most of us in this room would say, hey, I worship God. Like, I'm a Christian. What if somebody looked at you and was like, how long are you going to be a halfway Christian? That's tough, right? That's hard. The problem with these guys are, they kind of are halfway following God. By kind of, I mean, they absolutely are halfway following God. But here's the thing, guys. I have spent most of my life halfway following God, just to be honest. And like, there's no mincing words. I've just halfway followed him for most of my life. I didn't really care about church. Not really. I showed up. I enjoyed it whenever I showed up. I didn't really care about what the pastor cared about. Like, pastor was also my dad, so that made things awkward, right? Like, I mean, I did, but not really on the level that he did, right? I just thought it was cool. Like, hey, God's great, But God's great on Sunday morning. God's great on Wednesday night when our youth was. So for you guys, Sunday nights. But during the week, it didn't really make a hill of beans in my life. Like, it didn't change anything. I was halfway following God. So I want to ask you, I'm not going to tell you that you're halfway following God, but I challenge you to really assess, really read into yourself. Are you halfway following God? Are you kind of doing one of these things where, hey, I know God's better, so sometimes I pick him, but I also kind of, have these other things I really kind of want as well. And we'll talk about what that looks like in a second. So let's hop into the verses, and let me just point out a couple things for you to think about. First off, it says, so Ahab sent to all the people of Israel. To all the people of Israel. Here's what's crazy about this. I told you, I'm not going to tell you if you're halfway following Jesus, because I don't know at the end of the day. But I can tell you what Elijah realized in this story. It was everybody. It wasn't like, some Christians struggle with that. Oh, some of the people of God struggle with that. No, it was everybody. It was all of them. I did, and maybe you are tonight, just like these people. Everybody struggles with idolatry, with halfway following God. Is that you tonight? Are you struggling with that? Because all of these people were. You'll also notice this. It says, all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel, all right? If you're reading this story, when you read Mount Carmel, here's what you would think. Here's what the original readers would have thought. They would have heard mountain, and in their minds, a mountain was the closest place to the divine realm, the place where the gods were. Mountains were the closest place to that you could possibly get. That was their thought, all right? That's what they believed. So when you are reading this today, what you need to get is this. I get to Mount Carmel, and I should be like, oh, the author wants me to start thinking something divine, something godly, something crazy is about to happen. Because we're on a mountain, right? Like when we get to mountains, something crazy is about to happen. Something divine, something godly is coming, okay? So then he goes on, and Elijah came near to all the people, and he said, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? All right. How many of you guys can say, hey, I've memorized a verse in the Bible that says limping in it? Yeah, me neither, right? This is that verse where I was like, honestly, I didn't even know this was here. I forgot about it until I started prepping for this. Limping is kind of a weird word in the Bible, but here's what I want you to think about when you see the word limping. It carries this idea of like broken movement, right? Like when Mason was up here and I had him going back and forth, right? You may not have called it like a limp, like, ouch, my leg is hurt, but his movement was broken. Every time he tried to go one way, he kind of turned back the other way and then did the same thing again, right? It was broken in his movement. Or it's just a lack of action, right? In the same way when he was here, he really wasn't doing much of anything. He was expending energy, but he was just turning back and forth. That's what this author means when he says that they were limping, all right? The people were stuck. They were stalemated. They weren't going either way, and they weren't really experiencing either of the two things that they were looking at, which was God and Baal for them. For you guys tonight, you've got stuff competing with God in your life. That's just life. You've got God, and I'm assuming y'all are smart. You've heard, hey, God's the best option, right? You know he's the best. You know it right here. But there's still these other things that compete with your time with him. And maybe they're going to win. Maybe you keep going back to them instead of God. Do you ever feel like that? Right? These people, they were going back and forth, and they weren't really experiencing life like they should have. I want y'all to look at me and give me your attention for just a second, because I kind of want to get real here for just a moment. Look at me, and I want you to think about this and be honest with yourself. Do you ever kind of feel like, hey, I'm not experiencing life to the fullest? Like I feel like there has to be more than what I'm experiencing right now. Do you ever feel that way? I did for most of my life. Like when you're going through daily life, school, sports, church, homework, driving, you have these ebbs and flows of like, oh, this part's really fun, and then this part's really not. And then it all just starts to lull. It's just kind of like you look back over your week and you're like, meh. Like it was like, okay, wasn't anything special. And all of a sudden, life just kind of becomes gray. I'm not really experiencing what I want to experience. There's a guy named C.S. Lewis. I love him. I talked about, Ivanka said like she likes reading. I like reading. This is the guy I like to read. C.S. Lewis, really neat guy, great imagination. This is what he says. He says, if I find in myself a desire that no experience in this world can satisfy, the most likely explanation is that I was made for another world. Here's what I'm saying. If you get to a point in life where you're in a lull, it's gray, you feel like there's got to be more to life than this, there is. There is more to life than what you're experiencing. But here's the problem. You're stuck between two options and you're not moving. And that's how I lived my life for a long time. And this is the solution that he gives. How long are you going to go limping between these two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. Here's what he says. Elijah is drawing a line in the sand for the people. And Elijah is saying, all right, it's decision time. There's no more of this halfway stuff. If God is the Lord, if he's the boss, if he's the king, then follow him. But if he's not your king, just be real and don't pretend that he is. Don't keep trying to follow him. Go follow that other thing that you want. And guys, here's what I want you to know. I don't want to be the kind of guy who just encourages you to fake it till you make it. I want you to be real tonight. I want you to be real with yourself and with your small group leader in a little bit. But right now, just worry about yourself. All right? Right now, just think about this. Is God really king? Or is there something else you want more? Just be real. I know the right answer is God's king, God's better. But just be real for a minute. Is God really better to you? He might not be. I have spent a lot of my life, since I was saved, I was a Christian. Like, undoubtedly, he wasn't better. God wasn't king over my life. He just wasn't. I even felt called to be a pastor, like a student pastor, do what I'm doing now. Like, I knew that was what God wanted me to do. He still wasn't my chief desire, my chief pleasure. He wasn't what I wanted the most in life, if I'm being real. Maybe you're there today. I want to tell you, it's okay to just be real about that. Like, I'm not telling you that it's great. Like, yeah, I want you to want God the most, but if that's not where you are, don't lie. Just be real with yourself. And maybe this is the first time that you've been real with yourself about this. Maybe this is the first time that somebody's challenged you to be real about this. If God is not the thing that you want the most, okay, just be real about that. Just tell yourself, hey, God's not what I want the most. Because y'all, otherwise you're going to spend years upon years upon years faking it. And then eventually you're going to come to a head where you're like, yeah, I'm done faking. I'm just done. You're going to walk away. Figure it out now. Just be real. You don't have to fake it here. You don't have to pretend. It's just you and God. Just be honest. Hey, God's not what I want the most in life right now. But here's what actually happens in the text. Elijah challenges them to do this, but then it says, and the people did not answer him a word. They were silent. Because, guys, I want you to know this. Most people that you know, most people in this world, most people that I know, and I was one of these people would rather avoid this decision. We know we have to make a call at some point, but we avoid it. We push it off. Some of us have felt that feeling of, maybe I'm not as good of a Christian as I want to be. You ever felt that before? You ever felt that? Like, man, I just don't feel like I'm the Christian I'm supposed to be. I'm not one of those Christians, you know? But then we quickly just move past it. Oh, well, whatever. And we just keep going on about life. Guys, that's how I lived for the longest time. I would get that feeling. I would be like, oh, I'm not the Christian I'm supposed to be. And now I would just keep pushing on. Just keep faking it. But guys, eventually I got tired of faking it. And maybe this tonight, if you're being real, you're tired of faking it. It'd be real nice if you didn't have to anymore. It'd be real nice if you could just be you and be honest. You can be. But also, I know that there's some people in here who might be where I was a few years ago. When I got tired of faking it, I said, you know what? I'm not going to fake it anymore. I don't want this superficial, this kind of fake God that I've made in my head. I want the real deal. Like that God that all those people talk so big about. Like they feel him, they hear him, they know him, they hear from him, they talk to him. I wanted that God. I was done settling for this fake God that I had made up in my head. Maybe tonight you're like, hey, you know what? Honestly, I'm done too. I'm done with this fake God I've made up. I'm done with this God who doesn't care about how I live. I want a relationship with a God who's my father and my friend, who cares about me, who talks to me. Guys, that is not just for pastors. You can have that right now tonight. I promise you. There's a guy named A.W. Tozer, which is a crazy name. Like, I don't know. I could go by J.F. Smoke. Oh, that sounds good. That's what I'm throwing on a book if I ever write one. I might just write a book so that I can throw J.F. Smoke on there, you know? Be pretty cool. Anyway, I just thought about that. That was not in my notes. Like, I just kind of thought about that. So this guy is A.W. Tozer. And this is what he said. I just read this week, and it like shook me. I was like, this is awesome. He's talking about that there are people who are to the point, and maybe this is you tonight. I know it's going to be few. It's not going to be everybody in here, but maybe it's you. So I want you to focus for just a second and assess, is this where I am? There are people that are tired of faking it, and they're ready to just desire the God of the universe, whatever that looks like. Whoever he is, they want to figure it out. Who is he really? Not just who I imagine him to be, not with who I'm comfortable with him being, but the real God. This is what A.W. Tozer said. He said, these people, they are eager for spiritual realities, and they will not be put off with words, nor will they be content with the correct interpretations of the truth. They are thirsty for God, and they will not be satisfied until they have drunk deep at the fountain of the living water, that is Jesus Christ. Here's what that means, guys. There are people in this world, in our society, they're rare. There are people in this room, and it's few and far between, but there are some people who are just finally ready to cut all the games and say, I'm willing to put my foot down, and I want God. Whoever he is, whatever I have to give up, it doesn't matter because he is that good. I'll give up the old stuff. I'll leave those in the past because they don't compare to the real thing. Maybe that's where you are tonight. Guys, we can't be like the people in this passage who just sit there and don't give an answer. The reason is this: Jesus Christ came to this earth and he died on a cross. That means he was tortured to death. He was tortured to death. And he did it because of what you and I deserved. He came and he died on a cross. He gave up his life for us. So how can we not give up everything for him? He's absolutely worth that. And guys, I used to say that. I gave it lip service all day long. I was just like the prophet Jonah. Like I would talk all about how great God was and how I believed he was so powerful. But he didn't change anything about my life. Life was a blur. It was gray. It was bleh. It was meaningless, honestly. And it was fine at first. Hey, hop on my Xbox for a little bit. Hey, go to practice, work out. It was great. It was fun. Hang out with some friends. Have a girlfriend, have a significant other. It would make me feel better for a time. But at the end of the day, eventually I just got tired of it. I was like, it's still not what I want. There's got to be something more. Here's the thing. I told you earlier, you don't have to be a pastor to have this kind of relationship with God. And the reason is you don't have to have any special knowledge. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be the most dedicated person in the world right now. All you got to do is surrender. All right? Y'all ever seen the people who wave like the white flags and it means that they surrender, they give up? Can you if you're in a battle, can you halfway give up? Like if the enemy is shooting at you, you're getting weighed down, you will die in the next few seconds. Is there any way to halfway surrender to them? No, that doesn't make sense, right? No, if you surrender, it's all out. It's I'm throwing my hands in the air. I'm done fighting. Guys, what I'm encouraging you to do tonight is assess, are you really genuinely willing to say, I'm done fighting, God? Whoever you are, I want it. I want whoever you are, and whatever that looks like. And whatever I have to give up, whatever I have to lose to have you, it's worth it. I'll give it all up. I'll leave it all behind. And guys, I can tell you, I was your age when I made that decision, and it was worth it. I hear stories all the time. My friends talking about all this cool stuff they did, going on trips, doing the sport, whatever. And I hear all the time stories about, yeah, I kind of regret spending my time on it. There's probably something else I could have done. You know, I've never heard somebody say, hey, I got really dedicated to God and I really regretted it. You ever heard somebody say that? If they have said that, they weren't really dedicated to God. I've never met somebody who's truly dedicated to God who regretted it. All the other things, you might. You might regret it, you might not. With God, I can promise you, you won't regret it. So my question to you tonight is, are you willing to throw up your hands? Say, I am done fighting for life my way. I want to live God's way. I want the real God. I want you to know this. If you're not ready to say that, you don't have to. Don't be another faker. Just be real. Hey, I'm not ready to do that yet. I'm not ready to do things God's way completely. If that's where you are, let that be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pray. We're going to spend a few minutes in a small group talking with some other people about this stuff. Hey, what does it look like to surrender to God in my life? What does that actually look like? So let's pray together, and then I'm going to dismiss you guys out the back, okay? Let's pray. God, you're not a God who halfway came after us. You didn't come halfway to us and stop. God, you came after us and you laid everything down. You gave everything up. You gave up your throne. You gave up your pride. And God, you gave up your life to save me, to save all these students in this room. God, I'm sorry that I spent so long halfway worshiping you. I wish I had just been honest about what was on the throne of my heart, what was so important to me. God, there are students in here today. Some of them, God, they just need help. They need you to empower them to just be real, just to say, hey, God's not the most important thing to me right now. God, I ask that you empower them to have that clarity, to know where they stand with you. But Father, there are also some students who are ready to throw their hands up and say, God, I am ready to follow you with everything I have. I will leave everything behind to know who you are and to be with you for real. And God, for those students, I ask that you would empower them to start a conversation with me, with Ketty, with Josiah, with Rianne, with Shauna, with Stacy, with Fran, with some adult leader, just to say, hey, I'm done doing this thing halfway. God, if there's a student in here who maybe needs to make that decision for the first time, God, empower them. Give them the boldness to just come and say a few words to us. Just tell us, hey, I need to do something with God. God, give them the power they need to do that. God, I ask you keep us focused, but that you let us have fun during this small group time together. God, thank you so much for these students and all that they mean to you, all that they mean to me and every other leader in this room. God, thank you for your grace and your mercy. We ask all these things to the praise of your